Okay, good morning everyone. Shalom Aleichem Bruchim Habayim. Agit Tavach. We're starting a new Mitzvah today. Siman Kuf Nun. Siman Kuf Nun. Hilchos Beis HaKnesses. The laws of a Shul. The first thing is, I'm going to say my law first. The first law is of a Shul is it has to be a Shul. A Shul is a place where people go to daven. Let's say they don't go to daven. Let's say they go to talk. Or let's say they bring their phone in. So it's not a shul. It's like a social pub or a club. It's a clubhouse. But if you want to be a shul, it has to be a place where people go to pray. You know, that's the first halacha. So when you come into shul in the morning, you want to make sure that you take your phone and you leave it outside. Otherwise, you're not even entering a shul. Okay. Siman Kuf Nun. Binyan Beis HaKnesses of Shia Gavaya. Building a shul and it should have height. Koifin b'nei Erzaza livnois Beis HaKnesses. The residents of a city could force each other to build a shul. So in other words, let's say you have a bunch of people that live in an area and they're davening in someone's living room, or there's a tent in someone's backyard, and somebody gets up and says, look, we got to build a shul. Everyone's going to have to give X number of dollars to make it happen. So one guy says, I don't want to. I'd rather daven in the living room, or I'd lie in the tent. No, we force him. We coerce him to pay money to build a shul. It's a social obligation. It's a societal obligation of Klal Yisrael to build a basic house. V'liknois lehem Torah, neviim uksuvim, and to buy a Sefer Torah, and to buy a klaf for the Haftarah. Let's say a guy says, I don't want to buy a klaf. We don't want to buy a klaf, because then the bar mitzvah boys can't lane. So we say, pal, when you have the opportunity to start a new religion, then you could legislate that it's more important for the bar mitzvah boys to lane. But since Hashem gave the Torah to Moshe Rabbeinu on Har Sinai, and in it He gave us a Shulchan Aruch, it says we force people to pay money to buy Nevi'im and Ksuvim. V'ayin le'el siman nun hey im kavim zel zel liskor lehem minyan. Look earlier whether we could force people to pay money to hire others to come to make a minyan. Says the Mishna Berura, Koifin v'chulu zel l'shayin harambam hilchos tefillah perak yud aleph kamakom sheyesh bo yasara miYisrael. Whenever there are 10 Jews, tzarich lahachin lo bayis sheyikansu bo l'tefillah. You need to prepare a house that they should enter for davening. B'choleis tefillah, whenever there's a time for tefillah. Makom zenikra Beis HaKnesses. Va'afilu hamiyut yichayim lachaf es hamerubin. Even the minority could force the majority. In other words, even the minority who want a Beis HaKnesses could force the majority who do not want a Beis HaKnesses. Regarding the mitzvah of building a Beis HaKnesses, the Steichemet brings in the name of the Maisa Avram and other Achronim that it's included in the mitzvah Aseh of Asu Li Mikdash. He brings the Zayar. Every Beis HaKnesses is called a Beis HaMikdash. So, by the way, if you wanted to emulate, let's say, Titus, and bring, let's say, an Avodah Zarah or like a Zaina into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, so what you could do is you could take your phone and you could leave it on and you could bring it into the shul, and you too could be like Titus. If you've ever wanted to do something like that, that would be an opportunity for you. Also, the Steichemet brings that some hold building a shul is only mitzvah d'Rabbanan. Some say it's not even a d'Rabbanan. It's not a dairaisa, it's not a Rabbanon. It's like, sort of we said before, it's a societal obligation. In other words, there are mitzvahs dairaisa in the Chumash, there are mitzvahs Rabbanon, and then there are what are called chiyuvei b'nei ha'ir. The Avnei Nezen Archaim Siman Beis says building a shul mitzvah Rabbanon. However, the mitzvah is not the maseh ha'asiyah, the mitzvah is the result. Therefore, you don't have to be the builder. You could hire a construction worker. The construction worker could be of any ethnicity, because the mitzvah is the result of having the shul, not of the act of building it. Okay. Now, regarding the Geder HaChiyuv of building Beis HaKnesses, the Biur Halacha says later on, it's not enough that you have a place to daven. You need a makom miyuchad that it should be considered a mikdash ma'at. Okay. We continue in the Mishnah Berura. Live nice. V'im b'koicham live nice. If they don't have the capacity to build, mechuyam akvanim liskar. They need to rent makam miyuchad l'tefillah. V'kaso aposkim de bebinyan beis hakneses goivin l'fimamain l'chuda. Regarding building a shul, we collect only based on money. What does it mean only in accordance with money? Meaning, depending how much money you have. If you're rich, you give more. If you're poor, you give less. Uveschirus beis hakneses, but by rental, goiven chetzia l'fimam v'chetzia l'fim. But if there's a rental of a shul, then the way we charge people is 50% based on your monetary status, and 50% just how many people in your family. But in general, when a shul is built, don't say, well, he only gave X, so I'm only going to give X. No, he only gave X because he doesn't have so much. You have more, you're mechuyev to give more. Machon Maggid Harakiah Seif Siman Kuvnan Daled B'Shem Rivash V'Huva B'Chashavish Seif Siman Kuv Sam Bez Rama Hama'akev Livnais Beis HaKnesses. If you prevent the building of a shul, afilu yesh Beis HaKnesses acheres b'ir, even if there's another shul in the city, Moineahu Rabbim Milasis Mitzvah, you're preventing the Rabbim from doing a mitzvah. The Knesset Hagdola adds something very harsh. He says if you prevent the building of a shul, it's like you destroyed a shul. Rav Moshe explains that it's better for a city to have two batei knesiyos than one, because sometimes one is a better location for someone on the other side of the city. So therefore, if you prevent the building of a shul, it's like you destroyed a shul. Umasik sham dima Beis HaKnesses mechila oisam az adarabba asurim liparit. However, if the big shul holds everyone, then they're now at a split. It's better for everyone to daven together because of Beroivam Hadras Melech. V'ayin b'tshuvas Radvaz chela gimel sim tafayin beish sheherach b'dim elu v'sev d'Rav Kasav v'chol b'zeh b'zman shkulam leiv echad hu shekilusan oila yafe. The idea that everyone should daven in one place and that everyone should daven in one binyan is when everyone has the same mindset, so their unified prayer is beautiful. Avalam chalak libam, but if they can't get along, yoiser tov hu sheispalu kol kat b'fnei atzma. It's better for every group to subdivide. Says the Radvaz, don't mistakenly think that I'm trying to say that it's better for there to be different segments or different groups. No, the hakrak siv chavur atzabim Ephraim hanachloi. Groups of idolaters are Ephraim. Let them be. Chalak libam. In other words, when Klal Yisrael is unified, even if they serve Avodah Zarah, Hashem says he'll overlook it. But chalak libam. But when they're disparate, when they're in dispute, ata yashamu, now they're guilty. It's best if they could all try to have one viewpoint and come together in tefillah. But where they can't get along, if they're always quarreling, then you pick the lesser of two evils. In other words, like this. Let's say you have a big minyan, you have 200 people in the minyan, and they have some kind of disagreement about shul protocol. So the ideal is if they could come to some kind of consensus and maintain the large minyan. Why? Beroivam Hadras Melech. But furthermore, more than that is that it brings Hashem nachas if everyone could get along. If it's impossible for everyone to get along, then we have no alternative. It's better that they should break up into two different groups. Why? But Hashem doesn't like when there's a split? Yeah, but Hashem doesn't like even more when there's constant bickering. So you got to pick the Rabbi Meir. Of the when breakup in a shul is good or not good. Uksuvim. Now, when the Mechaber says Liknoisam Torah Neviim Uksuvim, says the Mishnah Berura, why would you need Ksuvim? If anybody wants to learn Ksuvim, they'll have a sefer of Ksuvim. What if you're in some shul where nobody's yeshiva educated and nobody can really pick up Seforim? Are you mechuyev to buy Seforim for a shul? Should a shul have Seforim even if no one is going to learn it? Rabbi Moshe says, you're mechuyev to buy Seforim so that it's possible for people to learn, especially according to the Rush, that by buying Seforim, you're mekayim mitzvahs kesivas sefer Torah. There's a chiyuv on the Bnei Yair to buy Seforim, even if nobody's going to learn them. Accordingly, let's say you live in a city where there's no minyan. So, since we're learning, the purpose of buying Nevi'im and Ksuvim is not to learn from it, it's to learn from it. Even if you don't have a minyan, you have to buy it. What if it's a choice between building a shul and having a klaf for the Nevi'im? What's more important? You should sell your shul to buy a klaf for the Nevi'im. You sell the shul to buy a klaf for the Nevi'im. Der Shul brings from the Bir Halacha, Mutter lechatchila limkar beis hakneses k'dei liknois Nevi'im uksuvim. What if there would be no other shul to daven in? Go into Yankel's living room and daven in his living room so you could have a klaf for the haftarah. More important to have a klaf for the haftarah than to have a shul. No, again, we're not telling anybody what to do. We're just here to tell you what Hashem once told Moshe Rabbeinu the right thing is for Jewish people. But of course, you could do whatever you want. You know, that's your prerogative, whether you're going to follow what we call the Mosaic law, the Torah Misinai. Anyway, okay, we'll continue now. That was back in their day, where they only wrote Tar Nevi'im Uksuvim. Aval Achshav Mechuyavim Gam Leknois Sefrei Talmud. You also have to buy Gemaras, Uperusheim, and the explanation. L'lamed bahem l'ktan v'gdolim, for a young and old to learn. Uv'mekayim shasfarim matsuyim, and in a place where Seforim are very commonly found. Ein koifin l'knois Seforim. Then, meaning in places where Seforim are readily available, we don't force anyone to purchase Seforim. Rak sefer Torah. We only force them to buy a Sefer Torah. In other words, if there are many people in the city that have Seforim that people could borrow, Gemaras, Nevi'im, and Ksuvim, then we're not going to force the residents of the Shul to purchase that, because anyone who wants could easily borrow it. We will force them to buy a Sefer Torah. Now, the Aruch HaShulchan says, Bizmanenu, you're mechuyev to buy Tanakh with Rashi, the Rambam, the Torah, the Shulchan Aruch, and other Seforim HaMechrachim. What if you have a choice between a Sefer Torah and a Talmud Bavli? You're in a city, and either you could buy a Sefer Torah or a Talmud Bavli. The Mishnah Berura says later, it's possible you should sell the Sefer Torah to buy a Talmud Bavli. Regarding the Maila of Kniyas Seforim, says the Shal Shuvas Chasam Sofer, that if somebody who provides Seforim for Loim Dei Torah, then it's like you're doing tzedakah b'chaleis, like it says, v'tzidkasa yamed sa'ad. Should you sell Seforim to buy a mikvah, to build a mikvah? No. Building a mikvah is a little mitzvah compared to buying Seforim. So you have shuls, they're busy making a mikvah. They're not even making it for women, they're making it for men. And they don't have a klaf to lane the haftarah. Now, truth be told, when the Bir Halacha says later on in Siman Kuf Nun Gimel, you're allowed to sell the shul to buy Seforim, it's talking about if you don't have Nevi'im and Ksuvim to learn from. Whether you're going to sell it to have Nevi'im and Ksuvim to read, that we'll have to see. In the Sefer Tzedakah Mishpat, he brings from the Sefer Taras Mayim that this idea that having Seforim is more important than having a mikveh is only if you wouldn't have Seforim at all. And you'd be able to build a mikveh without buying the Seforim. But if you, by not selling the Seforim, you're not going to have a mikveh at all, then you would be allowed to sell it. Now, once we're on the topic of the klaf, Lamaisa the Dirshu brings down, are you mechuyev to buy Nevi'im and Ksuvim al-klaf for the Haftarah? In Siman Reish Pei Daled, the Mishnah Berura comes out l'chadchila, it's roi v'nachain that every Tzibbur should have Nevi'im and Ksuvim al-klaf. And that was the minhag Hagra, and that is the minhag Meni Kehilos, v'ashrei chelkam. The Shar Tzion says that if a Tzibbur is noyeg lahakel, ein limchais biyadam. But if, let's say, they happen to have some money, of course they have to buy Nevi'im and Ksuvim. Especially in our days, where they put marble in the shul. You can't put marble in a shul if you don't have Nevi'im and Ksuvim. You can't do that. Why do you need marble in the shul? You don't need marble in the shul. You do need Nevi'im and Ksuvim. And even though they're kavanos l'shem shamayim because of Zekel v'aveu, it is more important to have Nevi'im and Ksuvim. I cannot imagine that there's any shul today that is so simple that they don't have any ornaments in the shul and they can't afford to buy a klaf. Lamaisa the Shulchan Aruch Harav is Mekel, and the Kasav Sofer, let's see what he says over here. It says in the Beis Medrash of Sam Sofer, there were noyeg always to read the Haftarah from a Chumash. But like we said, the minhag Hagra, the Mishnah Berura says l'chadchila you should have Haftarah b'klaf.
It sounds like a little bit of a chumrah, the way he says it.
What do you mean a chumrah? Yeah, yeah. The lashon of the Mishnah Berura is l'chadchila. The lashon of the Mishnah Berura is l'chadchila. Correct.
Talking about like decisions in a shul, and there's a majority, and how do you have a right to do marble? Because if no one in the Tzibbur wants to do it sounds like a chumrah to me.
Yeah, it's a chumrah, but it's a chumrah which is appropriate to do, considering the fact that when it comes to 90% of other things that people do, they're machmer. Why are they? They're not mekel. Nobody, when you buy a Sefer Torah, you buy l'chadchila Sefer Torah. What things do we do b'di'eved? You're doing something for the whole tzibur. Why would you do the Haftarah b'di'eved? Because yeah, but it's wrong. That's a misplaced chumrah. It's more important to be machmer on the Haftarah than to be machmer on nice marble. In other words, you can't force them.
Where do you see that? I don't know.
What?
How do we know that?
Because the Chafetz Chaim, who is an Orthodox rabbi, he said so. He said, the Chafetz Chaim says that it's more important to be machmer on haftar and a klaf than to be machmer on zekeli vanveu in the Beis HaKnesses. He says in the Sharat Tzion in Sun Reish Pei Daled, ein limchas v'ad nogim lahakel, but if they could afford it, especially because they've spent so much money on things in the shul that are not needed, and yeah, they're kavanas l'shem shamayim, but it's more important to be misnaya in the haftarah than to be misnaya in whatever. Yeah. If you pay someone, you'll have someone to lane. The same way, what if you don't have money to buy the marble? You're not going to have the marble. So if you don't have money to pay someone to lane from the klaf, you won't have it. Look, if you're in a makeshift place and people have a hard time putting it together and building the shul, so it's maybe legitimate. You don't have the money to pay $10,000 for each one of the Nevi'im and Ksuvim. But nowadays the shuls, they invest millions of dollars in the shul, so why can't they put in $50,000 to get klaf for the haftarah? Anyway, Reb Chaim, based on the Grove, is very makbid on. I know that if people ask Reb Chaim Kanievsky, if a shul doesn't have klaf because they don't have money for it, Reb Chaim said, get money for it. Okay, let's hold it here.